So the family of a man whose body was discovered days after the flood swept through parts of Tshwane last week says that they were let down by municipal emergency services. Mokhonwana was caught in the storm while driving his Uber in Olifantspruit, I beg your pardon. Now, but calls for help made for both the Ekurhuleni and Tshwane emergency services, we're told, were unsuccessful. Mokhonwana's vehicle was swept downstream and his body was rescued days later. So his niece, Tshegofatso, joins us now via our video link for a sense of what exactly happened here and what the way forward may look like. Tshegofatso, thanks very much indeed for making time. Once again, condolences to you and your family on your loss. As a start, to understand, Frans was in his Uber vehicle when the floods obviously took a grip over the city of Tshwane. What happened afterwards?
Thank you, Ayanda. So on the 5th of February, just before midnight, he received an Uber request from 2 Botswana nationals, and he was transporting them from Centurion Hotel to midstream. Their car got swept away into the river, and they managed to get out of the car and get onto the roof of the car and call for help and send us the location. They were on the roof for at least an hour and a half while we were trying to get emergency services to the scene. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in all those attempts. We went from pillar to post, trying to get somebody on the scene. Tshwane said it's not their jurisdiction, we should call Ekurhuleni. Ekurhuleni said it's not their jurisdiction, we should go back to Tshwane. So we went back and forth for a good hour without receiving any help. And unfortunately, at some point, I guess they got swept away by water.
What's really devastating is that I understand he was actually able to call you as a family whilst he was stranded on the roof of his car. I mean, obviously he must have been distressed at the time, but what do you reckon he was going through at that moment?
They all sounded very, very, very scared, extremely scared, because I guess they were staring death in the eye. They could see that if they don't get help anytime soon, that will be the end of them. So those are very distressing calls to get, especially from a family member, and you're hearing their last cries for help, and you're feeling powerless as to what could be done to help them. So it's really not a memory any of us will forget anytime soon.
Of course, what makes this even more devastating is that his body was found, I think, 5 days later?
6 days later.
6, wow.
So 6 days later, we were able to get assistance from private divers that helped us. And unfortunately, the SAPS recovery team could not recover any of the 3 bodies. So all 3 bodies were recovered by a family friend who has a private diving team that came to the scene to assist us because they could see we were so frustrated. And unfortunately, yeah, as I said, the SAPS team that was there as recovery, there was no sense of urgency. There was no, what could I say? Yeah, there was no sense of urgency.
Not only was that the issue, but I mean, you've already mentioned to us that part of your difficulty was trying to ascertain what they meant by jurisdiction, right? You being sent from pillar to post between Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. If you had an opportunity to speak with the emergency services, I mean, what would be your appeal to them at the very least? Especially, and I say this at the very least because, I mean, the sad thing is that life has been lost here and there's no way of bringing it back.
At the very least, their call center people need to be trained because none of those people are trained for emergency services. At one point, the lady was asking us to hang up and call my uncle back to get his ID number. And we're like, how are we calling back and getting an ID number when we're telling you somebody's on the roof of a car in need of help? You know, so those are the kind of things we're dealing with while trying to get help from the people. So at the very least, they should at least have people that are trained to deal with such situations that can at least point you in the right direction. Because even when they spoke about the jurisdiction issue, they didn't give us any other context. They didn't give us the correct contacts to call. We had sent them the location because he managed to send us his location. And so they had all of that information, but nobody could actually give us even a proper number to call. So at first we had to Google all these different numbers and try and get the correct emergency services, and the local police station as well. Apparently their switchboard doesn't even work. So the whole police station, no phones work. So that's also quite disappointing, because we thought if we call the local cops, they might be able to get EMS on the scene much quicker than we could.
Yeah.
So at the very, very least, they need to have trained people in those call centers.
Really devastating listening to you, because we all know that in any kind of disaster moment, in any kind of crisis, time is of the essence. It's literally a race against time, and that makes the difference between life and death. Very quickly from you, Tshegofatso, before I let you go, have emergency services been in contact with you or your family post to this tragedy?
No, the only people that were quite helpful after, obviously, we fought with nearly the whole SAPS recovery team was Captain Magazi from Olifantspruit police station and Sergeant Sikoti. So those are the two that would stand out. The rest, no. Nobody has been in contact. There's no sensitivity training because even when we got onto the scene, they were already talking about bodies. So it wasn't a rescue and recovery. You know, it was more, I mean, it wasn't a rescue. So they were already looking at recovering, and you cannot be telling such things to the family when they are still in shock. We all don't know what happened. And so that the sensitivity training for the department as well, for the Ekurhuleni department, the SAPS recovery team, that needs, they need great training.
Sure. So if you're able to stay on the line for us, I'd be most appreciative, because we've also got joining us via our video link now, Charles Mabaso, who is the EMS spokesperson. On the telephone, we've got William Glady, who's the EMS spokesperson for Ekurhuleni. Charles, of course, is in Tshwane. Tate Mabaso, thanks for your time. I understand you've been listening into our discussion with Tshegofatso. Not ideal, her recollection around what happened to her family member. Let me just get your initial response to the myriad of issues that she's raised.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Good morning to the viewers as well as the family members. May I start by sending sincere condolences regarding the unfortunate incident that happened. Yeah, obviously the issue of borders does come into play at some point. But emergency services, we do respond beyond our borders if we are so required to do in an emergency situation, particularly in Gauteng, because we do have mutual assistance agreements with the municipalities that are around Gauteng. And I would like then to label this incident an unfortunate incident. And also like to state that, you know, we haven't, as emergency services, received such a complaint from the families, which we would have, even still now, we would give it the necessary attention it requires, so that we are able to determine as to which number, for an example, was used to contact the emergency services. Calls into our call centers are recorded. We may be able to go back and obviously find where the gaps are. I do understand that that will not, you know, bring back the life that is lost, but it may work in our favor to ensure that in future we do avoid such incidents from occurring.
Yeah.
But then to round it off, it is unfortunate that the borders are very soft, and then incidents happening outside our borders sometimes tend to cause a problem to dispatchers. And obviously, during an emergency like this, we have resources that we sent out, like with the flooding incident. It is not any fireman who goes into the water or any EMS official who goes into the water and rescue people. It takes special kind of specially trained people in swift water rescue as well as diving, to engage and go out and rescue people in similar situations. And within that particular day, our divers and swift water rescue technicians had multiple incidents throughout the whole city. Around Centurion, there were more than 10 incidents that happened in one shot, and then including further areas like Bronkhorstspruit, up to the areas even outside our municipalities, like in Darda, which is in the Northwest province. So you can imagine how fast the response was to try and save lives that the teams were supposed to save at that particular
If I can come in there, Charles.
night. Taking only a few skilled people in that particular skill set.
I hear you. And, you say it's an unfortunate incident, and I'd argue that's putting it mildly. So to be quite clear, what happened to Tshegofatso and her family shouldn't have happened. This moment of them being sent from pillar to post on the back of this argument about jurisdiction, that in a context of a disaster like what we saw took place weeks ago, is actually unacceptable.
Yeah, one would say it is unacceptable because it is obviously a responsibility that one could take to link the caller with the next call center. But then, as we are sitting here, one would like to have a chance to look at what actually played out. Hence, I am saying, should we receive such a complaint, it will be looked into. I gave an indication that calls into our call center are recorded. And if there was or there is a gap that did take place there, necessary procedures as well as standard operating procedures would have to be looked into to ensure that such an incident does not happen again, and then that if there is an area of accountability that we need to take from our side, we would then be able to say this is where we are accountable. We can definitely look into that.
All right, so there's some kind of recourse, and I sympathize with the family about them not laying a complaint. They're dealing with a devastating loss, and I think it's all in a context where they're even yet to lay France to rest. Tshegofatso, let me bring you back into the discussion. You've heard what Charles has to say. What's your response?
Thank you, Mr. Mabaso. And a cousin of mine, actually, Mr. Lucas Ludowa, did manage to speak to Mr. Mabaso because we had thought another body was France, but then you confirmed that it was not. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like there's any accountability, because if then he says there are procedures and protocols that are in place for such situations, we didn't see any of that. And if somebody is in such a dire situation, and even if there is a jurisdiction issue, there should be a process in which their call center people are able to then connect you to the right emergency services for your jurisdiction, or at least give you a number that would be correct, and you would be able to get through to the emergency services. So I'm hearing what he's saying, but unfortunately, it's not enough. And I'm hoping that they could change that so that we can at least save, future lives. Unfortunately, we can't save my uncle, but, if they change their processes and procedures, then hopefully we can save more lives.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're trying to cover as many aspects of the story as possible. William Glady is the EMS spokesperson for the city of Ekurhuleni, and he joins us via our telephone line. Ntate Glady, thanks for your time. To make sure we've covered all corners here, is your understanding the same as that of Charles Mabaso? This idea that in the event of an emergency, if anyone logs a call with either of the EMSs, it's actually incumbent upon the officials to try assist people get to the right person, as opposed to sending them from pillar to post on the back of matters to do with jurisdiction.
Good morning, sir. And thank you very much for this opportunity as well. And to send the condolences for the loss of life to the family. Yes, from the city of Ekurhulene's perspective, we share the same sentiments with what Mr. Mabaso from Tshwane has said. I will confirm that on the day, yes, we received the call exactly 5:55, and definitely we responded accordingly to the area where the incident happened. But yes, we had a lot on our table on the day. Earlier on, I remember we had to rescue about 4 people, almost a kilo or a kilo and a half away from the incident where this claimed one has happened. So, and we managed to respond. So what we really plead is that members of the public as well to help with the issue of understanding how to call for an emergency services. And even once we receive it, definitely our call centers will be able to dispatch the nearest fire department to a scene. And at the same time, we need a specialized rescue unit within the different municipalities that goes onto the scene to go and see as to what to do. You know, like Mr. Mabaso mentioned, not all the firefighters are trained as water rescue or swift water rescue personnel. So what we did is we also arrived on scene, then we started with the search immediately. And we're working with the stakeholders. We say stakeholders, we're talking SAPS K9 unit. We are talking water wing from SAPS as well. So yes, we searched throughout up until into Irene area, but we couldn't find anything. So then that's when now we started engaging and said, no, let's go and start in Irene where the dam is and start now searching.
Okay.
So basically, that's how we operated. And with the boundaries in between, those are soft boundaries, we operate as one. Whether Tshwane, Joburg, whatever, Ekurhuleni, yes, we operate across the borders.
I'm keeping a close eye on the time. Charles Mabaso, can I ask you to explain very clearly what Tshegofatso and her family can do next for recourse? You mentioned how there are calls that are recorded here. I imagine at the heart of what the family is hoping for now is some kind of justice, at the very least, in memory of France, whose life has been lost here.
Yeah, look, we are speaking issues of borders here, and within that, there is an issue that the person that called during the emergency first went through our call center and was sent to a different place without detail. So what I would encourage the family to do is to forward a complaint to obviously myself. I would be able to provide my email as well as the email of the department. Like the lady said, the brother called after a few days or so, and I spoke to him, but he did not bring that up at the moment, at that particular moment, that there was an issue with calls. So now they should forward a complaint to us stating what the complaint is, and obviously then give us time to then investigate the complaint. And we are a public service where we need to be held accountable.
Okay.
We would not shy away from being held accountable. Obviously, where we did not provide a proper service, would not shy to improve our services to the community, because
And then another thing, Mr. Mabaso, there's no way we could have brought up this issue because at the time we were still trying to locate his body. So the focus was trying to find my uncle, and it was not on complaining. So, but since he has given us a way forward, we shall be laying that formal complaint and forwarding all the calls. And because there were several people, there were people that arrived on the scene that tried to get hold of emergency services while they could still hear their cries for help.
Okay.
So it's several people that had called in. So it is not true that they only received a call at 5:15.
All right.
They had been receiving calls from 12:30, 1 a.m. They only responded, yeah.
I'm hoping that at the very least you'll be able to get a sense of justice at the end of all of this. For now, let me thank you all for your time. Really do appreciate it. William Tladi, Charles Mabaso, and Tshegofatso Mokhonwana, to all three of you, once again, thanks very much indeed. All right, way overdue. Time now for the latest in the world of sports. Apologies.